Okay, good morning, everybody out there in virtual field trip land. Welcome to the virtual field trip. Today we are going under the docks. My name is Phil, and we are here at the beautiful Banfield Marine Science Center. And I'll just say it again, beautiful Banfield. And it's a very, very cool show today where we will send cameras under the dock. We'll be pulling things out of the water, and you get to see what actually lives beneath the dock right here today. So first of all, as I said, my name is Phil, and we have, let me see, so far 12 in my list, and also a couple schools joining us. I'd like to welcome South Island Distance Education School and also White Rock Elementary is out there, and also Pacific School of Innovation and Inquiry. Welcome to the show. So the way this works is we'll be showing you some cool stuff. We'll be asking some questions, so feel free to answer those questions. The best spot to do would be within the chat, and we'll do our best to answer everything. So let's just begin. I like to begin this with showing you where we are located compared to where you may be. So let's pull up Google Earth right here. And so all of Canada here. So we have, as I mentioned, we have folks around White Rock area and around Lower Vancouver Island, Southern Vancouver Island. Let us know in the chat if you are not at school, if you're doing this virtually, let us know from where you're watching. And just to give you a heads up, so the Banfield Marine Science Center is on the west side of Vancouver Island. People arrive here usually by ferry or over a short plane ride from wherever they're coming from. And when we run normal field trips, we look after 3,000 students per year coming from all over Western Canada. And they make their way to Bamfield. And we are on the southern corner of what is called Barkley Sound. Here we have Ucluelet. And then Long Beach, just a little bit up beyond that. And Tofino, perhaps you've been to one of those places, perhaps you've been to Bamfield. And let's just visit Science Center right here. So Bamfield's a very, very, very small town. Within the two sides of Banfield, there might be like 150 people living here year round. And we have the west side of Banfield. And then the Science Center is on the point right here on the east side of Banfield. So the Banfield Marine Science Center, I should mention all of Banfield, in fact, is located within the traditional territory of the Hooay First Nation. And the Science Center is a field research and education campus, if you will, that is owned by the 5 large universities in Western Canada. So University of Alberta, of Calgary, Simon Fraser University, UBC, and University of Victoria are all partners in this place. And so today, we do virtual field trips from our lab spaces, from beaches, from boats. And today we are on the dock. So right at the bottom of the hill, you just tour on down the hill and there you are, right there. So that's where we are today. And I'm going to send this over now to Kelly, who is on the dock.
And from the dock, you can see a beautiful view of Bamfield Inlet on a sunny day. This is a rare occasion in November. We don't very often get sunshine here, but today is the perfect day to be out here on the water. I'll flip my camera around so you can see me. There I am. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our lesson today. This is something that normally you'd be doing in person. You'd visit the Bamfield Marine Sciences Center and we'd take you underwater, sort of, to see what kinds of marine life are down here just beneath the surface. But this is actually a fun lesson to do virtually, and I think we'll continue to do this even once we can resume in-person trips too. There's another.
Kelly. So we have, just to mention, we have some people coming in from Mission, BC, virtually from Victoria, of course. And Violet says that she sees her Nana's house.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Cool.
Wow, awesome. Thanks for everyone for joining from all those different locations. I think it doesn't matter where you're watching from, we have something interesting to show you today. And I want to introduce one more team member who's here helping out today as well. He's right behind me in the sun there. That's Owen. Hi, Owen. And so he will be helping us to investigate some of the marine life underwater here in just a moment. It's going to be a lot of fun. You guys can participate in this lesson using the chat. So you're all on Zoom. Use the chat. You can ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer them in real time as we go along. Sometimes I might ask you questions as well, and so feel free to answer those questions using the chat. Should be pretty easy. Let's get started. I know you guys want to see some live marine animals, and so the very first way that we will do that today is by pulling some animals up out of the water, bringing them up here onto the dock so that we can examine them. In order to do this, I'm going to get Owen to help me out here. I'm going to switch my camera back around here. And let's take a look at Owen over here. So hanging off of our dock, we have some ropes that go down into the water. And on those ropes, we've added some extra spaces that, in this case, they happen to be bucket lids, plastic bucket lids that they've actually been hanging down into the water for a couple of years now, many years. And over time, animals have started to grow on these bucket lids. So all of this stuff that you're seeing, these are all animals. I know it just kind of looks like a crazy jumble of things, but all of these are live marine animals here. And don't worry if you don't recognize all of these animals just yet, because what we've done to them, we pulled them out of the water and brought them into the air environment up here. They're not super happy about that. Most of these animals can survive for a little while out in the air like they are right now, but we wouldn't be able to leave them out here for very long. Okay, so there's one animal, Owen's pointing at it, that I think all of you will recognize. Oh, did my camera just, oh, there we are. Okay, great. So this animal, I think it doesn't matter who you are, I think you will recognize this one. It has 5 arms, and this particular one happens to have some white spots all over it. What animal are we looking at here? I bet there are some students at White Rock Elementary that could answer this question for me. Do you recognize this one? Yeah, you got it. This is a sea star, and specifically an ochre star. Yeah, starfish, sea star, same thing. And this particular sea star has been hanging out on our dock lines for the past, I don't know, at least a month or so. We've been looking at the same animal. It's very tightly stuck to the bucket lid here. Owen's using his fingers to try and pry that sea star off, and it is stuck so tightly to the lid. And the reason it's stuck is because underneath that animal are hundreds of little suction cups that are sticking it to the lid itself, and it's very tightly attached. So we are not going to be able to get that animal off to show you any differently than what you can see right now. Okay, there are some other large animals on this bucket lid. There's a white one over here. It's squishy. You can see it kind of bending as Owen touches it, very soft and squishy. And over here is a brown one. And these are actually the same animal, same species, just different color variations. Did you see it react when Owen touched it? It's kind of moving, sucking in. And I understand if you guys don't recognize this animal because it doesn't look like its normal self right now. It is closed up. Oh, you got it. Anemone. Excellent. So these are both sea anemones, but they're closed right now. You can't really see their tentacles. They are kind of upset with the fact that they're dealing with gravity up here in the air, and also the air itself, and probably the bright sunshine too. So they're just closing up and waiting for us to put them back in the water. And a little bit later on, we'll be able to show you what these anemones look like when they're out or when they're underwater. There's a third one over here on this side too. You can kind of see some of the tentacles of this one, but it's also looking a little bit strange because it's up out of the water. Okay, what should we look at next? Well, actually, let's talk about all these squiggles all over this bucket lid. You see how there's all these squiggly bits? Owen's pointing at them. These are little tubes, and there are animals living inside of these tubes. An animal created the tube, and now the animals are living down inside. You can't see the actual animals themselves, but the animals are in there. Yeah, so these are tube worms. Believe it or not, worms. Yes, you guys are getting it. Good job. Tube worms living on this bucket lid. These particular tubes are very solid, so when I touch that, it feels like a tooth, and the shell is actually made of calcium carbonate. Same as think of a human tooth. When you touch a tooth, that's what it feels like when you touch these tubes. But not all worms live in tubes, although it is common in the ocean for worms to live in tubes. We'll show you some other worms. There's some better examples in a little while. This is another one that does live in a tube, but this tube is a flexible tube. Doesn't feel like a tooth when you touch it. It feels more like paper. And you can see at the tip of the tube, there's kind of an open space. The animal's not there, but there's a darker section near the bottom, yep, down there, that the worm is hiding in. So you can almost see the worm itself. There's a question here, do fish pee? And the answer is yes, they do. Everything does actually, or it produces waste products, and that pee does go out into the ocean around us. So looking over the side of the dock here, there's pee all over the place, and also poo for that matter. Everything just goes into the ocean here, but that's just the normal way of life. Something really gross, but also kind of interesting, is that a lot of these animals feed on the stuff that's just floating around in the ocean. So they might actually be eating each other's poo in some situations. Pretty weird. Okay, let's put this this rope back into the water, and we actually have one more that we can pull out and examine. There's some different things growing on the next one. So Owen's going to help us out. We put them back after a few minutes anyway, just because we don't want to stress our animals out too much by leaving them in the air for too long. I saw some more anemones on this one. This one's bigger. It must have been underwater for even longer over the years. You can really see the tube worms poking out of this one. And again, they are the flexible kind of tube worms, not the calcium kind of tube worms. So here you can actually see one of the tube worms that some of the animal is poking out the end of the tube. Oh, and what happens if you poke it? Whoa, did you guys see that? It retracted really quickly down inside the tube and it hid. And the question, do tube worms ever come fully out of their tube? No, this particular kind of tube worm, there's a part of them that comes out. It's their feeding tentacles, but the worm itself stays lodged within the tube. And I think it actually kills them if they get pulled out of their tube. I think that would kill them. So they're kind of attached down there in the base. But a little bit later on, we should be able to see these tube worms with their feeding tentacles sticking out, and it should make a little bit more sense. So we'll come back to those a bit later on. Okay, other stuff that we're seeing on this bucket lid here. While I'm looking for the next animal to talk about, I have a question for you guys in the audience. And I'm wondering if you know how these animals got here. So how did these tube worms and these anemones, and maybe even that sea star we saw at the beginning, how did they arrive on these ropes underneath our dock? Because when we put the ropes in the water, they were just plain old ropes. This particular one, there's actually an old fish trap inside. So there's a sort of a mesh base down there that originally was just made of mesh, and then over the years all this stuff has attached to it. So how did that happen? How did these animals get here? That's something you can be thinking about. And Owen's pointing out a nice red thing that's growing here. That is an animal that's called a sea squirt. And it sort of grows as a crust on the surface of things. And there are other sea squirts on here, different color, that are growing right on the surface of the tube worms. Maybe you can see that. Yeah, there's some good guesses coming in about how these animals arrived here on the dock. So their eggs and their eggs settled here. And then there's an answer about zooplankton. And there's lots of good answers coming in. Actually, maybe Phil, can you help to interpret some of those answers? I missed a few of them.
Sure. We have folks mentioning about eggs floated in the water and attached to the lids. Eggs or babies floated around and landed on the lids to start growing. Mention about drifting zooplankton. And yeah, people mentioning floating and anchoring and such. So yeah, a lot of good answers in there. And then a question
Awesome.
about is seaweed edible in Banfield? Well, it depends on the species of seaweed. Many seaweeds are edible, for sure.
Yeah, most of them are. That's a good question. We found another sea star down here. It's sort of hidden in the shade, down in the shadows there, but there's another purple ochre star hiding in amongst all these tube worm tubes. So that's a fun find. This
And
other
then
kind of feathery stuff on here, yeah, that stuff that Owen's holding there is actually an animal, believe it or not. It looks like a plant or a seaweed, but that's an animal known as a hydroid, and it is related to coral and jellyfish, and anemones, actually, for that matter. Go ahead, Phil.
yep. Question about are sea squirts like sea sponges?
They are very similar to sea sponges in some ways, and those ways are that a sea squirt, so here's some more sea squirt here. Some people describe this one as mac and cheese looking sea squirt. It just kind of sits there and it doesn't move around. It can't move around, and neither can a sponge. They sit in one place, and their whole purpose in life basically is to filter water through their bodies all day long, and they're filtering water to catch their food. Both sponges and sea squirts do this, and some other animals here as well. These anemones are also filtering water all day long. There's a question, where are the barnacles? The barnacles aren't growing on this particular rope that we've put in the water, but they are growing on the dock itself and actually on some of the pilings over here too. So let's get Owen to put this back into the water. And I'll just take you on a quick tour over here to what we call the pilings.
Yeah, they're also on the bottom of my boat.
They are. And it's very high tide right now, so most of the pilings are underwater. These are just like the wooden support beams that hold our dock in place. But when you look down into the water, all of the kind of whitish stuff that's covering the surface of the pilings, those are the barnacles, and they go down, down, down into the water. Great job. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next part of our lesson here now. You guys did an awesome job of coming up with some answers for how these animals arrived on the dock, and a lot of you were correct. So it has to do with the fact that when these animals that we've just seen are babies, they different version of themselves, a totally different form to their bodies that are known as plankton. And plankton are just tiny, tiny microscopic things, little animals and plants floating around in the water all around us all the time. They're always down there. So we have a special way of collecting plankton that I want to show you. And again, I'm going to get Owen to help me out here. So Owen's here at the end of the dock now. And he's holding the plankton net. And oh, sorry, there's a question here first, Owen, so I'm just going to answer that. Why aren't other animals attached to the wood of the dock besides just the barnacles? They are actually, and we'll see in a little while. The barnacles are just the ones that are the closest to the surface right now. Once we get able to look a little bit deeper underwater, you will see there are other animals attached to the wood besides barnacles. And Phil, was there another question that came through there just as I was talking?
Yeah, it was about does the dock rot? Is there a specific wood or treatment used to prevent rot?
That is something that is a common problem where wood that's in the water will often start to rot away after years and years of being in the ocean water. Ocean water kind of eats away at things. So I'll show you our pilings again. These ones, they're pretty clean, but once in a while people will add sort of like a tar substance to pilings, and there's remnants of tar on this one. It's called creosote actually, and it is kind of a toxic substance that prevents things from growing on it and also prevents the wood from rotting away quite as quickly. But it is also kind of a harmful thing, so we are trying to get away from using creosote. That's what the black splotches are on this section of the piling as well. Okay, so back to what Owen is doing. Owen's holding a special kind of net here, and this is our plankton net. It is made of a very fine mesh, and it's kind of cone shaped. So at one end of the net, there's an opening, and when we put that down into the water, it'll funnel water all the way down to the opposite end, which has this little cup at the bottom called a cod end. So to use the plankton net, we just put it down into the ocean. In this case, we're going to just hold it right off the side of the dock, and that works just fine. There's actually quite a strong current here today, so you can just see the plankton net extending throughout the water, and all kinds of water got funneled through the surface, the opening of the net, and now it's collected down into the bottom of the net.
Really
Then that
clear
little
water today.
Yeah, it is clear. That little cup at the bottom unscrews, so we can take apart the net. And we have a special holding spot for the plankton. It goes into this jug. And what do we do with the plankton? That is an excellent question. Let's take a look. Oh, it just looks like water in a jug. But Owen's going on board the boat here, which I forgot to mention, Phil is on board the boat. So Owen's going to share our plankton sample with Phil, and then I'll just climb in there too and show you guys what Phil's up to on board with our plankton sample. So not only is Phil on a boat, but he's set up with a camera and a microscope so that we can look at the plankton sample under a microscope, because all these things are really microscopic. They're super tiny and we won't get to see them unless we have a microscope. So take it away, Phil.
All right. Thanks. Let's just adjust our. There we go. All right, move my cameras around, so hopefully you're seeing side by side the planktons, the microscope. So microscope is on. We're not going to look at my fingernails right now, but I did want to show some of the things we were looking at on the dock just now. Kelly mentioned they were hydroids or hydrozoans, that very filamentous looking stuff, and so I grabbed a little sample of that just to show you that it is actually an animal. Let's just bring it into focus here. So hydroids are related to jellies and anemones, and it's almost like they have tiny little anemones. It's almost like a coral where they live a colonial life. They live all together, sharing nutrients and such. See if I can find a live one. Oh yeah, that's one there that looks like it's starting to come out. Just about. Anyway, it is a filamentous colonial creature, and all those little end pieces there, they have an individual living inside, and they come out, and like I said, they look just like anemones or a little coral, if you will. Okay, I think there's one right there. Let's see. Yeah, they don't like to be picked off the dock there. There we go. You can just sort of just barely make out little bits of tentacle right there. They're definitely not relaxed because, you know, we pulled them out of the water, put them into a dish. Anyway. All right, let's get on to our sample here. What's the question? How can plankton help our environment? Well, plankton are the bottom of the food chain, really. If you think about, so there are two main types of plankton out there in the ocean. And actually, let me know in the chat, does anyone know what the two main types of plankton are? One of them was mentioned earlier, but see, bring it on back here. Two main types of plankton. Okay, yes, you are correct. Zooplankton is one type, and the other one, phytoplankton and zooplankton. So phytoplankton are the bottom of the food chain. So they're the ones, they're the algae out there, they're the photosynthesizers, the ones that start everything. And then the zooplankton will eat the phytoplankton. Following that, you'll get larger animals eating the zooplankton. So the bottom of the food chain, or food web, if you will, begins with phytoplankton. And the more phytoplankton you have, the more zooplankton you have, the more productive the area is. So it's all, that's definitely going to help out the environment with having more plankton. And phytoplankton is also a really good absorber of carbon. So they can help with pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. Okay, let's make the screen bigger here. So first off, I mentioned phytoplankton. So let's just look at this one. That little circle right there is a type of phytoplankton called a diatom. So diatoms come in chain shapes or little sphere, or not spheres, but circles, more like a disc, if you will. And yeah, definitely some things moving around. We'll get to those. So there's one of our chain, or sorry, our solitary diatoms right there. And actually, they're not in the kingdom Protista. Diatoms are within the more related to seaweeds. Okay, but there are some phytoplankton that are protists. No, I digress. Let's go back to something else here. Oh yeah, let's look at the stuff that's moving. There's a big guy. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Oh, not moving, but still, oh, one behind it was moving. So very cool creatures here. I have found some copepods. Let's change the lighting. So there we go. There's a good one. Copepods are these, if anyone's familiar with SpongeBob, as most kids are these days, copepods are, they have these long antennae and usually one eye spot. So there is a copepod. So plankton from SpongeBob was actually based on a real thing, based on a live animal. And these copepods, they're everywhere and they make up a huge part of the zooplankton. A lot of things eat them. And they're one of the fastest creatures on the planet. Forget if you were to compare their little jumps and spurts, their jump is equivalent to you jumping at 600 kilometers an hour, something like that. Oh, there's one of those chain diatoms I mentioned. SpongeBob is based on a sea sponge. Correct. SpongeBob is the filter feeder, or the sponges are. Oh yeah, a couple chain diatoms. So they come in these chain shapes as well, but I think it's cooler if we find the moving things. Okay, oh, what the heck was that? Oh wait, what's that one? Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. I think I found a baby snail. A lot of the zooplankton are actually the babies of things, the larval forms. So a lot of things, as they sometimes sea creatures just put egg and sperm in the water and then they develop in the water as they drift around. But oftentimes, once they hatch, they become adrift and they just move around. The idea of plankton is to a planktonic lifestyle helps with the population to disperse and not overcrowd the area. Because sometimes these creatures, they put thousands of babies at once. And if those 1,000 babies fall right beside you, that's new competition for food and for space. So ideally, you want to disperse and just have your young conquer new areas, so to speak. So there's you just make out the curl of the snail shell right there. You can see the inside is very transparent. A lot of the zooplankton will be transparent. It helps with camouflage in the ocean to avoid being seen. All right, let's try a different sample here. Whoa, that's a fast thing. What is that fast thing? It's too fast to catch. No, stop moving. Are you getting seasick, Kelly?
That one is really fast. I don't know if we can get a good look at that one.
But unfortunately, let's check out this thing right there.
Oh.
I found something that is not an animal or a plant. We found a little bit of microplastic. So sad but true, many things are made of plastics and petroleum products, such things, and all those fibers end up eventually in water samples in the water. We're finding a lot of little threads and plastic bits in our sample. Yeah, so microplastics. You think about all the fleece out there, it's all made of plastic product, and every time things get washed, little bits they break down a little bit, and modern appliances are able to filter out a whole bunch of that, but sometimes it just ends up back into or going into the system. Oh, what's that one? I think I found a worm, a type of worm right there. No, too fast.
That one's also pretty quick.
Someone asked about barnacles, and I think I noticed a cool barnacle thing. Oh, there it is. Here we go. It's hard to define here, but we are looking at, so barnacles. Actually, can anyone out there who's watching tell me what are barnacles related to? What group are they in? If you know phylum names, what phylum are they from?
And if you don't know phylum names, then yeah, what are their closer relatives? So they're cousins, kind of. I'm seeing some good
Okay.
answers coming in.
Yeah, we have mention of crabs. So they are related to crab and shrimp. And yes, they are with the arthropods. So they're essentially like bugs. So they're related to insects and bugs and crustaceans. And what we are looking at here is the shed skin of a barnacle. So you see, so just like all other crab and shrimp and insects, they have to shed their skin to grow. They molt. And this, it looks like a hairy hand. And those are actually the filter feeding legs. So barnacles, they are within their shell and they put these legs out to sweep the water and filter feed. And we are looking at the shed skin of an adult barnacle. Very cool find. And then we have a whole bunch of little wormy guys in there. It's not the inside of a barnacle, it's the outside of a barnacle. What's that little shrimpy looking thing? Oh, just a big copepod. Oh, hopped away, super fast. I think that's another barnacle larva. Yeah, so that'll grow up to be a barnacle eventually. It's very close. So barnacles will drift around and then they find a spot they like and then they stick their head down and that's when they'll start to create their shell. So the question was, is that the inside of a barnacle? That is what is inside the barnacle shell, but it's the outside skeleton of a barnacle or exoskeleton. Cool. How are we doing on the dock there, Kelly? Are we wanting to change gears here?
Sure, I think that we could move on to the next thing, but it's been so neat seeing all these different kinds of plankton. Especially one thing that I find super interesting about plankton is that I always find new ones. You never know which plankton you're going to see from day to day. It changes all the time. So it's always exciting to go exploring with a microscope and see what kind of plankton we have. And I saw another question, is a barnacle a mollusk? No, so mollusks are a different group. Mollusks include snails. We saw that little baby snail. That's a mollusk, but barnacles are actually related to arthropods. So the other shrimp and lobsters, like I saw in the chat earlier, those are their relatives, different groups of animals. Another question, does it hurt a barnacle when we step on it? Probably not, because their shells are so hard. Only if your foot slips and you scrape the barnacle off the rocks, then that's probably going to kill that barnacle. But if you just step on it, it's probably going to be okay.
This was a snail it was actually moving a second ago, coming out of its shell very slowly. Very slowly. Okay, maybe we'll come back to those things towards the end.
Sure. Oh my gosh, I don't even know the answer to how many kinds of plankton are there. There are so many kinds.
Yeah.
I've been looking at plankton for over a decade and I still find sometimes plankton that I've never seen before. So there's lots and lots of different ones out there, both phytoplankton and zooplankton.
Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, nearly all of, well, I'm not going to say all of them, but many, many, many of the invertebrates and even fish in the ocean have a planktonic larval stage, right? So, and then there's a whole bunch of creatures who are planktonic all the time, right? Like jellies are always planktonic, for instance. So yeah, it's just almost as many animals are in the sea have a planktonic larval stage or are plankton, and yeah, majority of life in the ocean, I say, has some kind of planktonic lifestyle.
Okay, Phil, do you want to spotlight my camera again? And I want to show off what Owen's got now because he's got a pretty fun thing going on here.
Okay.
Check this out, everybody. So our last little activity for the day. Oh yeah, this is our new favorite toy. This thing is called an ROV, remotely operated vehicle. It's like a little robot, basically. So it's got some propellers on it, 6 different propellers. And on the front of it, there's a camera. And this thing is designed to go underwater. So we can actually take you down below the surface and see all these creatures, all this marine life that we've been showing you, but in real time using this robot. So Owen's got the controls for the robot. It's on a tether. It's attached to the rope here, and then Owen's got the controls. So he's operating the ROV. And yes, this is absolutely a fun thing that you guys can see through the eyes of the ROV. So maybe Phil, if you switch the spotlight to the ROV's camera now. Oh, I can see that little snail moving though before you go. That's really awesome.
Oh yeah,
It's
let's just, yeah,
alive.
my snail. Let's bring back my snail. Oh,
Okay, I think
cool.
they want to see the ROV though.
All right.
We do have older models of the ROV. This is a fairly newer one. And it is a pretty easy piece of technology to learn how to use, especially if you're the kind of person that likes to play video games. You probably can drive an ROV. Look, it's looking at me. Whoa, and there is beneath the ocean. Wow, it is beautiful under there.
Great visibility today.
Super nice to see what's underwater here. Awesome. So what we're looking at now through the eyes of the ROV are those same 2 ropes that we pulled up out of the water before. And now you get to see them in their natural environment while they look a lot more normal. So maybe if we get in closer, yeah, awesome, Owen. We can see some new forms of life that weren't obvious when we were looking at them up on the dock. So the purple things, the kind of maroon reddish purple things, are the feeding tentacles of those tube worms. You see how each of those little red puffs, I like to think they look like pom-poms. They're poking out of the end of each tube, and those are the feeding tentacles of the tube worms. They stick those out into the water so that they can capture little bits of plankton that are floating by. And that you only see that when they're underwater like this. They were all hiding in their tubes when we pulled them up out of the water. So there's a view of those tube worms. I haven't seen the fish yet, but let's keep looking around and we might encounter some fish under our docks. There's usually a school of them somewhere down here. We just have to find them. You can see the chain that's anchoring our dock to the seafloor. And then, oh, that looks like a huge clump of tube worms over there. Oh, and can you turn the lights on for us? Oh, there it got, yeah, that's better. Wow, so each one of those darker kind of purpley red fluff balls are the feeding tentacles of the tube worms. But you also notice there's a lot of that kind of yellowy, droopy gunk, gooey stuff attached to those tube worms too. And that is the sea squirt that we were talking about earlier. Sea squirts, kind of similar to sponges. Turns out though, that particular species is an invasive species. So this is a bad animal to have under our docks. All that kind of orangey, yellowy stuff covering up the surface of the tube worm tubes is an animal we don't want living here. It's an invasive species. It's arrived here and it's kind of smothering the other things that are supposed to be living on our dock. So that's a bit of a problem sometimes. There's another one of our anchor chains. There's quite a strong current today, and that is sometimes a challenge for our ROV. It's okay at swimming around underwater, but it is a little bit planktonic in that it can't swim against a very strong current. And because we have a full moon, I believe today is the full moon, we have a very strong exchange of water going, and the tide is coming in very quickly, and it's pushing the ROV around a lot. So Owen's got a tough job today, but he's doing great at showing us the animals here under our dock. This one's a really long dock line. You can see lots of tube worms under there. Oh, and a jelly just went by. You see that kind of transparent cone, cup-shaped thing? That is a beautiful moon jelly.
Oh, very
Nice
cool.
find. Yeah, moon jelly. Awesome. And luckily for us, although we're not actually in the water with it, but if we happen to touch that jelly, it wouldn't actually sting us. So that's, yeah, thankfully not a box jelly. We don't have those here. We don't have to worry about box jellies around Bamfield. Very cool. You can see how that the bell of this jelly is kind of pulsating and moving, allowing it to swim a little bit. So it can move in the water somewhat, but it's still considered plankton. It's still getting pushed around by the ocean currents quite a bit. So this is the fun part. This part of our lesson is all about exploring what's underneath our docks. And we never quite know what we're going to find apart from on the ropes here that are hanging from the docks, because those animals have been there for a while. There's a good shot of the underside of the dock and then the sky up above. I love the color of the water here today. It's so beautiful here. We are very lucky to have a sunshiny day to show you. All right, well, let's keep looking around. And this is a great chance for you to be asking me questions. And there's a question right now. How long have you been working for Bamfield for? I've actually been at Bamfield for 13 years, and Phil has been here even longer than that. So we've been around. Owen, how long have you been here? Owen says 5 years. Okay, so now we're investigating over by those pilings, those posts that I showed you from the surface earlier on. Now we can see them from underwater, and we're still pretty shallow underwater. You can see all those barnacles on the surface of the pilings, but there's another animal there. You can only kind of see half of it from this angle. We have another sea star. Beautiful shot, Owen. So that is a leather star. And I think there's also a crab there that is camouflaging really, really well. Just below the sea star is a crab. And you almost don't, I didn't notice it at first. I was looking at the sea star, but the crab blends in really well with just the mix of barnacles and other things growing on this piling, this piece of wood. And that is a great advantage for this crab. It's super good at camouflage. A lot of these crabs, we call them decorator crabs because they actually pick up bits of their surroundings and attach them to their bodies. There's another crab over there. But the decorator crabs, they attach bits of barnacles or seaweeds or whatever happens to be in their environment. They stick it right to their shell so that they look just like their surroundings and they camouflage. The other crab that you're seeing beside the starfish to the left is a kelp crab. So that's a totally different species of crab. It's not as often that we see those kelp crabs on the pilings. They're usually on kelp, just like their name suggests. So on pieces of seaweed, really long brown seaweeds that are the same color as the kelp crabs. And when a kelp crab is stuck to a piece of kelp, you hardly even notice it's there because it camouflages really, really well. But next to that bright orange sea star, it's a little easier to see today. And yes, there are lots of barnacles on here, sparkly diamond-like barnacles covering up the surface of the wood, and lots of other stuff too, covering up the surface of the wood. Let's keep exploring. Yeah, and all of these animals are alive and they do move slowly up and down the pilings, especially as the tide goes in and out each day. On that far piling over there, there are lots more anemones attached to it. All of the white stuff poking out of that far distant piling are mostly anemones. We'll get a better look at those in a little bit. And this is the underwater view of those pilings that I was showing you from the surface earlier. We're going deeper underwater now. This is really exciting. The visibility is excellent in the winter months. So November, December, January, we usually have really clear water. And it's great for seeing all these animals. Nice, Owen.
There's a different sea star for us.
That is a nice big star. Wow. Some kind of large ochre star. And there's another leather star below it too. But that's much bigger than the one that we saw on our bucket lid at the start of this lesson. Very cool. So these sea stars are climbing up the pilings and they're actually eating all the barnacles that are attached to the piling. So you see still some barnacles here, but maybe fewer than we see up near the surface. And now we're getting into the anemone zone just down below. Those white and brown lumpy things are anemones, and they're a slightly different kind of anemones. They're called plumose or feather anemones. Oh, and there's our first fish of the day. I didn't get a good look at it, but it's probably a perch. Yes, sea stars do grow. So as they feed and eat, they do grow bigger, just like humans do, and other animals as well. Oh, there are some more fish hiding down there in the deeps. We're almost to the bottom at this point. So good question. How deep does this machine go? Right now, we're pretty much at the bottom, and it's only about 10 or 12 meters deep below the dock. But the ROV actually has a cord that is 100 meters long. So technically, we could take it into much deeper water than this and see lots of other cool stuff. And we found the fish. This is awesome. So these are kelp perch that we're looking at, a whole school of kelp perch. And those are just one of many different species of perch that are found under our docks, but kelp perch are a common one. And this, for those of you that live in Victoria, definitely if you go down to the docks, to the waterfront there, ooh, that was a big one. And you look over the side of the dock, you will probably see perch swimming around under your docks as well. I'm not sure about Vancouver, if that's still the case in Vancouver, but in Victoria, definitely. What is that pretty little red thing over there? It's another kind of crab. Beautiful. Is that one a pygmy crab, Owen? Pygmy rock crab, says Owen. Crabs are Owen's favorite kind of animal, so he knows a lot about crabs. And yes, you can see it moving. Awesome. Good find. Beside it are some more anemones. Most of them are closed up, but you can see one big one. Looks like a giant cauliflower. That's a plumose anemone, feather anemone. And notice that the tentacles are really delicate and feathery looking. They're specifically designed for capturing tiny bits of plankton in the water, and that's what this anemone eats. Whereas if you think of movies like Finding Nemo, where Nemo lives in an anemone that has different shaped tentacles, those anemones are, we have those kinds here as well, but they're designed more for catching bigger prey like fish. Small fish, for instance, would be what some anemones eat. They do look like palm trees.
There's
What's your
a
favorite kind of sea animal? Well, Owen definitely likes crabs. My favorite type of sea animal, I really enjoy watching jellyfish, personally. I don't know if that's my favorite, but it's hard to choose. What about you, Phil?
I'm quite partial to nudibranchs and other mollusks, so sea slugs, but also the big mollusks like octopus and squid.
Ooh,
There's a question about the most invasive species in our area, and that would likely, there's probably some more out there, but I'd say that colonial tunicate that we saw all over the bucket lids. The stuff, what did you call it? The mac and cheese tunicate?
yeah, I like
Or
to call it mac and cheese.
the pancake batter tunicate. Anyway, it just coats everything and takes over. Very invasive.
Yeah, I think in terms of under our docks, that's the one most invasive species here. There are other invasive species in Barkley Sound and in our area, but under our docks, that's definitely the one that is the biggest problem. Here we are looking at, is that a rockfish? I think that was a different kind of fish. Cool, we're right down here at the bottom. Oh, and what's the depth of the ROV right now? Owen says 28 feet. So we're right down at the bottom below the dock. Another big leather star down there. You also notice, oh, very fun. It took me a while to see that animal, but right there in the center is a sea cucumber. Good find, Owen. Look how spiky it looks. If you've ever had the wonderful opportunity to touch a sea cucumber, the spikes are not actually pokey. They don't hurt you. It actually feels more like a kind of lumpy water balloon when you get to feel it. Yeah, so they're actually soft, but they look impressively sharp and dangerous. They aren't actually going to hurt you. Some beautiful red seaweeds down here, both the leafy stuff that's growing on the rocks and also the pink crust that covers the rocks. Many of the rocks underwater here are pink, and that's a type of seaweed that grows on our rocks. So they really are, the rocks really are pink underwater. It's not just movie magic making it look pretty. And then this one is a very large type of kelp, which is brown seaweed. that grows under our docks as well. Oh, there's a nice new species of fish. Which one is that? That's is it a painted greenling, that one? Painted greenling, nice. Nice. What family is seaweed in or related to? Well, seaweed is, that's actually a complicated question. Seaweeds are kind of similar to plants in that they photosynthesize the same way that plants do on land. So they capture sunlight and then turn that into food. Nice, painted greenling. Oh, and this is awesome footage today. That fish really camouflages well until it moves around. But then there are some differences in seaweeds that make them unique from plants as well. So their body structure is different. They don't have the same, think of plants on land. Ooh, fish. Sorry, folks, I get really excited and distracted easily. However, so seaweeds, they don't have roots that attach them to the bottom, and they don't absorb water through their roots. So they are, they can just absorb water directly. And yes, some scientists classify seaweeds as protists. That's one way of looking at it. And some seaweeds are classified in their own kind of in with the plants. It actually is a controversial topic that it depends which scientist you're talking to. So don't worry if you've heard conflicting information about how to classify seaweeds, whether they're plants or not. Complicated question. There are 3 different kind of colors of seaweeds. Also, for the older students here, phyla of seaweeds. So they're classified by their colors of red, brown, and green seaweeds. We've seen red and brown seaweeds today. I don't think we've really seen any green ones yet. Green ones usually live closer to the surface anyway, and we're still in the deeper water. I just love how the fish are kind of hiding in amongst things, and you don't always see them at first, but then when they swim, you realize that they've been there all along. It's kind of a cool tactic. Wow, we've seen an awesome diversity of animals here. Lots of sea stars, that sea cucumber, a couple of different kinds of crabs, anemones and jellyfish, barnacles. Awesome. We are winding down to the end of our show. We have maybe about 5 minutes left. So this is a great chance for you to ask any burning questions, last minute questions that you have. What's that poking out of that old, looks like sea star arms, or is it legs? I think it's arms. Oh, and we might have just froze there temporarily. I think we're back.
We're back.
Good. It is sometimes hard to send the internet from the bottom of the ocean, so bear with us. Have we seen an octopus here before? No, not with the ROV, but we've been looking. And a couple of times we found evidence of maybe an octopus den where there's a little hole with some shells and debris outside of the hole, but we haven't seen an actual octopus yet with our camera. We're always on the lookout though, because that would be so cool. Oh, awesome. Somebody knows me from Bamfield. That's great. I think I know her too.
There's a question about why would rockfish have poison when it can disguise itself so well?
Ah, nice. Good question. So rockfish on their backs, on their dorsal surface, they have what's called a dorsal fin, that there's a spine. And so you have to be really careful if you're fishing and you catch a rockfish that you don't accidentally stick that spine into your hand or finger, because it does have a little bit of toxin to it that it'll get really infected, and it probably wouldn't actually kill you, but it would hurt a lot. You'd have to go to the hospital probably to get it kind of cleaned out and treated. But it's just a backup defense mechanism. So yes, they're really good at camouflage, but then if that doesn't work out for them and they still get captured by a predator, they also have this defensive spine that can do some damage to a predator. We're just exploring the ocean floor down here. Some more of those large brown seaweeds. They create lots of good hiding spots for different invertebrates and fish on the seafloor. So I really hope that you have enjoyed our little exploration here today and seen hopefully some animals, some new species, new animals. Is that a sea lemon that we just saw? I was wondering the same thing. The yellow thing is down there. Awesome.
Or is it a leaf from one of the local trees?
Oh, that's less exciting. I think that one is a leaf.
The sea leaf, perhaps. Yes.
Darn, I thought it was a sea lemon. For those of you who don't know what a sea lemon is, it is a type of sea slug that is bright yellow, just like a lemon peel. And one last maybe sea star to end off our viewing. That's a nice big ochre star. The earlier ochre stars that we saw were purple, and there was kind of a grayish one as well. This one's orange, and again, they're all the same species. They just have different color variations. Another question, have you seen any sharks here before? Not with our ROV. Most of our sharks actually live deeper underwater in Barkley Sound area. So we have one that's called a 6-gill shark that lives quite deep underwater. We have not seen one with the ROV. We also have dogfish sharks in our area. They're about the size of a salmon, a little bigger, a little longer than a salmon, not longer than say about a meter is their max length. But again, we haven't seen them with the ROV, but they are in this area in our waters. All right, so the ROV is coming back up to the surface now. I am so happy that you guys were watching our lesson here, and it's been a real pleasure being able to show you the types of creatures living under our dock. There it is, the ROV coming back up to the surface. Hi. Bye. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thank you to Owen and Phil for their help with this lesson. You guys have been an awesome audience.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.